pretty much why are you here today?
Yeah, we're here today because the Trump administration recently strongly encouraged the Supreme Court to completely repeal the Affordable Care Act. That is completely wrong. The Affordable Care Act did a lot of great things. It allowed children to stay on their parents' insurance until the age of 26. It also prevented insurance companies from discriminating against folks with pre-existing conditions. It also expanded Medicaid. That said, it did not go far enough. We need to preserve the Affordable Care Act, and we need to expand upon it. And we need to do that by finally getting to the point to where we have a single-payer system. As a nurse, I know that we are still discharging far too many people from the hospital with life-sustaining medications that they can't afford to pay for. I see the look in people's eyes as a nurse when they are admitted to the hospital knowing that they've got a life-threatening illness, but they know coming in they can't afford to pay for the medication and the medical bill. That's got to end. That's got to stop. We need a system in which medications are covered. We also need a system in which folks do not have to worry about their medical bill while they're in the hospital. Just a personal story. I was hospitalized about 8 years ago. I was working as a nurse in the hospital that I was hospitalized in. I was there for about a week with blood clots in my lungs and in my heart. And when I left the hospital, I was worried about how I was going to pay the bill as an employee. And when I got the itemized breakdown, my stay at the hospital was nearly $100,000. Luckily, I had insurance, so I only had to pay a few thousand and not the whole $100,000. But there are too many folks who aren't nurses who can't afford to pay that $2,000 or $3,000. Another personal story: my father died about 2 years ago. A guy who grew up dirt poor in Louisiana, but went on to be a lifelong teamster and retired at the age of 60. But he was a diabetic, and he had basically an infection in his groin, and it was something that if he had went to the doctor and stayed on top of it, wouldn't have hurt him much. But because he was a diabetic, and because he was concerned about a hospital bill that he probably could have paid for, he delayed treatment. And by the time he went to the hospital, it was far too late, and he ended up passing away a couple days later. So stories like that have got to stop in this country. We are the richest nation on this planet, and nobody should be afraid to go to the hospital because they can't afford to pay. That's got to end in the United States.
Tell me, you went to the stories of what are some of the big people that or like types of illnesses or conditions that people have that this will affect greatly?
Wow. Well,
diabetes.
if the Supreme Court does a complete rollback of the Affordable Care Act, folks with diabetes may end up being charged more for their care. Someone with multiple sclerosis may be charged more for their care. Somebody like me who's got a history of blood clots in their lungs may be charged more for their care. Additionally, if the Supreme Court just does away with the Affordable Care Act completely, all these people who have now been covered under Medicaid may lose their health care depending on how the Supreme Court rules. Children may no longer be able to stay on their parents' insurance until the age of 26. So all these college students out there who are currently on their parents' insurance may be put in a position to where they're suddenly concerned with how are they going to get health insurance to either cover an existing condition or to cover them should they need to be hospitalized. That's flat out wrong, and what the Trump administration is trying to do, we are staunchly against, and we're fighting because we want the Supreme Court to do the right thing and keep the Affordable Care Act because it's the right thing to do, especially in this age of coronavirus where we're all living through this national pandemic.
What about undocumented?
What about undocumented?
Yes.
I'm a firm believer that undocumented citizens should be covered under the Affordable Care Act. We know that currently they are not. I am a strong proponent of not only expanding the Affordable Care Act, but I'm a proponent of a single payer healthcare system that covers everybody. You know, if you go to Europe and you get sick as an American, you can go to the hospital and not have to worry about it. That should be the same case here in the United States. If you're somebody who's visiting the country or is here trying to make their way and trying to make a life for themselves, you should not have to worry about how you're going to pay for a bill, or worried that you may not be able to go back home because you owe the hospital money. That's flat out wrong. Again, we're the richest country on the earth, and we need to do better.
Can you say your name again?
Travis Nelson.
Travis,
All
thank
right.
you.
Why are they making these cuts?
Why are they trying to cut the Affordable Care Act? Because Obama. It's called Obamacare, and they hate President Obama. And then there's just a fear by many on the right of making sure that everybody is covered under a plan that folks who are wealthy will have to pay for. We know that if we're going to institute a single payer system, or if we're going to expand Medicaid and expand Medicaid, the wealthiest are going to have to pay more. And we know that the wealthy disproportionately support Trump and support Republicans in this country. And so there is a real fear by them that they will have to come out of more money out of their pockets. You know, that whole wealth and income redistribution that they're always talking about. They're afraid that they're going to pay more out of their pockets to keep the poor from dying.